Hello, my name's Oliver Collett, and I'd like to welcome you to my presentation called 64 Days Interaction. I'm going to speak to you for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. I'll try and answer all your questions to the best of my ability, but I may have to refer your question to a medical professional and get back to you. So, 64 Days Interaction. First of all, however, we're going to have a quick history lesson. Now, for those of you who have visited Austria, you may have heard of the Habsburg family, who were the royal family of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it's because of the Habsburg family that a condition known as mandibular prognathism became colloquially known as Habsburg jaw, Habsburg lip, or Austrian lip, due to its prevalence in that bloodline, which is the same condition that we're all dealing with, so we're in very illustrious company. Charles II of Spain is said to have had the most pronounced case of Habsburg jaw on record. His jaw was so deformed that he was unable to chew. Pathologic mandibular prognathism is a potentially disfiguring genetic disorder where the lower jaw outgrows the upper jaw, resulting in an extended chin. Mandibular prognathism is alleged to have been derived through a female of princely Polish family of the Masovian Piasts. The deformation of lips is clearly visible on tomb sculptures of the Masovian Piasts on St. John's Cathedral in Warsaw. However, this may be, there exists evidence that the trait is long-standing. It is perhaps first observed in Maximilian I. My mandibular prognathism is said to have derived as a result of having been born with Crouzon syndrome. I'll speak more about Crouzon syndrome more in depth at a later date. The most common treatment for mandibular prognathism is a combination of orthodontics and surgery. The orthodontics can involve braces, removal of teeth, and a bite splint. In 1995, when I was 10 years old, I started seeing an orthodontist because my jaws were misaligned. And this became an annual trip where they would take x-rays and photos of my skull, take a mould of my jaw and measure my height. The purpose of all this was to monitor my growth, and finally, in 2002, when they were certain that I had stopped growing, I was introduced to my surgeon who would carry out the procedure. We spoke for a while about everything involved in the operation, and then he asked if I definitely wanted to go through with it, which I did. So he set a date for the 19th of July 2002. Now at this point I must warn you, it gets a little bit gory, so you'll have to bear with me. The operation involved breaking and removing 10% of my upper jaw and securing a device called a distractor to my head with pins. The distractor basically creates new bone formations which are then stretched by the device. Whilst in the recovery room after the operation, I began bleeding from my mouth, and it took the medical staff about half an hour to get it to stop. I can't remember exactly how long it took to get them to stop bleeding, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. After a couple of days in hospital, I began to feel a bit better, and I asked if I could continue my recovery at home, which they reluctantly agreed to. Each day I had to turn these screws which were attached to the frame of the device, and in time would bring the upper jaw in line with my lower jaw. This process went on for 2 months, and in that time it wasn't all plain sailing. As my upper jaw was being brought forward, it was applying more pressure upon the frame. And on a few occasions the pressure became too much, causing the frame to slip and the pins to rip from my head. So in the end they had to reinforce the pins. Now you have to remember that this was sort of 6-7 years ago, so I would imagine the device has been tweaked somewhat to eradicate the problems that I encountered with it. When they were satisfied that my jaws were aligned, the frame was finally removed on the 20th of September 2002. A side effect, which I didn't foresee, was that the muscles around my jaw froze up and I couldn't open my mouth. So I was given some exercises to do which would loosen up the muscles. They gave me a stash of lolly sticks, and every day I had to increase the number of lolly sticks I could get into my mouth, one piled on top of the other. In those 2 months I couldn't eat, drink or sleep properly, lost about 3 stone in weight, and have been left with a permanent scarring to my head, metal plates attached to my jaw, under the lining of my gums, and I regularly suffer from head and jaw ache. Looking back, it was a physically, mentally and emotionally exhausting time, not just for me but also my family, but I don't regret any of it. Having the operation allowed me to get on with my life, because if I hadn't gone through with it, the condition would have got progressively worse to the extent that I wouldn't have been able to eat solid foods. When I was ready, I went out and got a job, and my confidence has grown ever since. I feel better about myself, I have a higher motivation, and after all that I went through, I have a greater determination. Today I've presented you with an honest account of everything that happened to me, so you get a good idea of what to expect should you choose to go through the operation. I am fully aware that people's pain thresholds are set at different levels, so it will be easier for some than others to deal with the physical pain. But there is no doubt in my mind that your family and friends will be there to help you cope with any other problems that you may encounter. However, at the end of the day, the decision whether to go through with it is entirely yours and not theirs. But for me, personally, having reflected on all the highs and the lows, I think all the good that's come out of having it done far outweigh all the bad things I had to endure. Does anyone have any questions?